We should have everyone's mic muted. Your speakers should be on so that you can hear the presentation. Today, we're going to be talking about lots of great things. If you want to share about today's session on social media, go ahead and use the hashtag xAPI cohort on Twitter and tag xAPI Gnome. Today, we're going to have a presentation by Chris Thompson from Rustici Software, so go ahead and tag them. Let's get the conversation going, both inside the web session and outside in the social media realm. Today is the 5th week of the spring 2020 xAPI Learning Cohort. It is amazing, but also going by so quickly. We started last week with team updates, so I'm excited to see where teams are this week and just to learn more with you. Today's guest speaker, as I said, is Chris Tompkins from Rustici Software. He's going to be speaking about receiving data, the new learning ecosystem. We're going to talk about where teams are and have teams check in during cohort business. And I'm excited to say that we've increased cohort by 15 members in the last week. So we're at 455 registered for this spring cohort. It's really exciting to see our community grow and to see folks wanting to learn and engage and try out xAPI. Behind the mics today, you have myself, Jessica Jackson, and then we have Aaron and Jamie, who are our producers, and they're the ones that are helping our conversation run smoothly and our technology to run smoothly as well. So we're in the 5th week of our 10th. Can you believe this is the 10th cohort? And this week, we're going to talk about the new learning ecosystem, spend a little time talking about the LRS. We have in the past few weeks been talking about exactly what xAPI was, how we use it within the e-learning space, how we use it outside of e-learning, how we use profiles. And then next week, we'll talk about the state of adoption. Within our first cohort web session, it was really interesting to see the vast majority of cohort members this semester are new to xAPI. So next week, we're going to talk about the state of adoption and see where folks are, learn a little bit about the e-learning guild research with Megan Torrance, and think about what now. Then we'll move into case studies where we'll see some practical application of using xAPI in the workspace. So you see some really great people that are going to be presenting, and then we'll have project demos where you'll have a chance to present out the things that you've been working on. Finally, we wrap up cohort with our infamous xAPI party. We call it a party, but it's a really a great day full of learning. With that, I'm going to turn the mic and the screen over to Chris, who's going to talk a little bit about receiving data, the new learning ecosystem.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm grateful for everybody's time on the call today. I hope it's useful as we kind of cruise through a little bit more about the LRS and its role in an xAPI ecosystem. Rustici Software is a name you might not have heard of before, but we're behind the scenes in a lot of different places that help e-learning products play nicely with one another. So you can see our magic when you use authoring tools and choose to save as some flavor of SCORM, AICC, TinCan, xAPI, whatever it happens to be. Many of those authoring tools are our customers, and we're the ones doing the epically nerdy packaging to those standards so that the team at Adobe doesn't have to be an expert in SCORM or xAPI. We're also behind the scenes in a lot of LMSs. We have a product called Rustici Engine, or even our SCORM Cloud that's nestled behind the scenes that helps things play and track. And so I'm often intimately familiar with trying to get data from one source to play and be recognized in data of another source. It's kind of our sweet spot. So as this conversation goes through, if you have questions, if you need to follow up with me, please feel free to do so. You found the one thing in the world that I'm really good at, again, which is helping two e-learning products kind of get along. If we can go to the next slide, what we're really going to talk about today is identifying when to use an LRS, the different ecosystems, how to make sure your xAPI content does play and track, and then I would like to leave not with a sales pitch for SCORM Cloud, but how to take advantage of some of our free tools. I know that many out there use our LRS as a first step. Seeing the SCORM to xAPI translation is also interesting, and so we'll be sure to spend a little time there helping you guys not only understand what's available to you, but also how to use it. So if we could advance one slide together. We're going to be talking about identifying when to use an LRS. And this is often a very early question that I get when we set up calls and I talk to different teams. And my advice is to always start with an end in mind. xAPI can allow you to track a lot of different things, I promise. But I've found that the most successful projects are ones that learn how to crawl, then walk, then run. And so having an end in mind does a few things. If you know in your mind the type of pie chart that you want to create as a data visualization, well, now we have something that we can argue about when we need to collect the ingredients and then work on the order of operations to bake that pie chart together. And so having that end in mind helps you scope the amount of work that you're going to have to do for your project, to identify the sources of truth for the data that you want to collect, and to begin to understand what kind of tangled web you're going to need to weave in order to get the results that you're looking into. Backing into this type of project is often the best way to conceptualize and think about it, because that end in mind really begins to matter. So my second piece of advice is let's make sure that we're using the right tool for the right job. Often I get people that come and say, hey, I really, really want to use xAPI. It's the latest and greatest. But it turns out SCORM might actually be the right moment for that person to deploy a course into an LMS and get some basic tracking on the other side. SCORM was never intended to be destroyed by xAPI, but it was a good augment for things that didn't play out normally, and we'll go into that a little more. But understand that this isn't a moment in technology where you should just be buying into the technology curve by using xAPI. SCORM's age is actually its strength, and this is one of the rare times in technology where you'll hear someone like me say that. But I do find it remarkable that when we're trying to play with interoperability, which is the concept of having one course go out in the world and just work and play, SCORM has hit a home run, and it is found behind the scenes in almost every e-learning system around the world. It's kind of the same utility that you see out of the MP3. I find it really, really remarkable these days that the MP3 is the only piece of software on the modern iPhone that I keep in my pocket that I've bothered to install on every other pocket device I've had since the 90s. And I legit have MP3s on this phone that I downloaded off Napster back in the day, and they're still with me. If the MP3 standard had changed every 3 to 6 months, we wouldn't be using it so far into the future from when it was initially implemented. The MP3 is stable, it's old, everybody can adopt to it, everybody just tosses an MP3 player in, and none of us really think about the level of technology and cooperation it takes to have a standard go global like that. But the SCORM standard has. And so if you're just going to be building content in a normal authoring tool, deploying it into a normal LMS, and everybody in that equation supports SCORM, cool. Let's keep SCORM going. And in fact, my SCORM Cloud has some ways to help convert SCORM and AICC tracking data into xAPI statements and put them where they're supposed to go. So we can help on the back end there make things a lot easier. But understand that there may be a blend of tools that end up creating the ecosystem that suits you best. So don't try and use xAPI for the sake of xAPI. Instead, let's use the right tool in the right moment. The last thing is kind of that difference between launching content from an LMS versus custom statements. So if you're in an ecosystem where you expect your learner is logging into a learning management system and sees a course has been assigned to them and clicks play on it, and it has a beginning, a middle, an end, and an assessment, great. You can use xAPI for that, or you can use SCORM or AICC. Use basically whatever tool is most compatible with that LMS if you intend for it to be the launching tool and the source of truth. But if we take a step back for a second and imagine, well, what do you do with the Air Force's crazy simulator? It's in virtual reality, it takes up a room, it rolls and flips and twists and jumps. None of that lives in an LMS. And that's certainly a little further than SCORM is able to go. And that's where xAPI starts making a lot of difference. If we think about the learning and training activities that live in other business systems, like a hospital or a high finance or a factory with compliance tools, okay, we might be interested in that data and they might be training and simulating work in different ways. And that's really where xAPI begins to shine. And we'll go into that a little deeper. So if we could advance the slide. So I'm going to now walk through a few different ecosystems that all have an xAPI learning record store as a part of them, but are used in really different ways. And my goal here is to kind of paint a picture of some of the different approaches that might work well for the projects that I know this cohort has in mind. And the first is called a standalone LRS. And I normally see this at big organizations that have a ton of different systems in place. And removing any one of those systems, combining any one of those systems, altering any one of those systems can be a huge monumental political task. People get comfortable with their LMS. People get comfortable with the way they teach in a classroom. People get comfortable with their mobile deployment or whatever it happens to be. And so instead of forcing your organization down a road of, please come into my LMS or please do these things for the sake of this new standard, what if we could just leave all of those little fiefdoms in place and use xAPI as a way to export just the tracking data that's relevant to the outcome that you're looking for? And so in this model, you'll see in the green boxes, you have all of the different sources of learning and training data. You could have your LMS, you could have different third-party providers with courses, you could have live sims, and then you probably have business systems with real-world outcomes living in them as well. This allows you to pipe all of that data via the xAPI standard into one central learning record store that then creates the blue boxes. Dashboards can pull from that LRS, you can build reports, analytics, maybe you're into badging, and all of those different data visualizations are powered by the xAPI statements that are co-located in that LRS from various sources of truth. So the LRS is used to store, retrieve, and study data about learning experiences. We also then know that sometimes it makes sense to replace what would be a traditional LMS with an LRS. But remember, you need to be able to initiate launch somewhere. And so an LRS isn't often a good band-aid for ripping out the LMS and putting an LRS in place, because that LMS handles user authentication, that LMS handles content library management, that LMS handles assignment, notification, scheduling, compliance re-ups. There's a lot of things that the LMS does to help organize your learning group. And just applying an LRS to the situation might not actually let you leave your LMS, but it can be a better way to get data out of a walled garden. And if you do have some type of employee portal or other type of customer interaction portal that does a lot of the things I just listed, maybe it makes sense to just add a player to that portal and sunset an LMS. But you need something for the learner to interact with in order to tell you what it is that they're trying to do. All right, let's advance another slide. So we can also then keep the LMS, but add an LRS. So this isn't a throw the baby out with the bathwater thing. This is help some data escape from the walled garden that the LMS has occupied for the last 15 or so years. And this can be an LMS or an organization that wants to continue to use their LMS, but have an external source of truth. And so you can see here, this gives you a one-stop shop for your learner. They always log into the LMS to take things that the LMS can handle. And that's traditionally e-learning courses from authoring tools, things like SCORM and AICC. But it can also be some classroom-based learning, because many LMSs also have some instructor-led training, ILT, or some other types of face-to-face human learning data capture tools as a part of that platform. And if you wanted to leave the LMS in place for those two categories of learning, what do you do with all the other stuff? And that can be a great blend of continue to use your LMS, continue to deploy it in the way that you do, but if that LMS off the shelf has its own LRS, that LMS is saying, hey, I'm in this market, I'm in this ecosystem, I've provided an LRS for you to use, and you should now be able to send externally authored statements to the LMS to bridge that walled garden and let data in for the first time. And in this type of ecosystem, you would be reliant on the LMS to not only provide the LRS, but also to generate the dashboards, reports, analytics, and maybe even badges that you expect your learners to have. And so many LMSs have this on their roadmap, and I hear a lot of lip service to it. If you do find a product that is a traditional LMS that claims to have this model, all of you on this call are clever enough, send them some statements. Make them prove or show you the fidelity at which they will be able to show you the dashboards and reports, because those are the things that they care about, that you care about. And we want to make sure that they are accepting externally authored statements in a way that makes sense for the project that you're working on. And so this is a test type of moment. Make sure that the LRS that you're connecting to can give you the blue box outcomes that you actually want. It can be kind of limiting. If the LMS doesn't have a report builder, or the LMS doesn't follow some concept of xAPI profile, registry, recipe, whatever you want to word it as, this can be pretty complicated. And you'll need to be able to push on that vendor to show you how they do it, to show you the visualizations available, and to help you make sense of what will this LRS do for me. It may be the case that that LRS inside that LMS isn't the right tool. And another follow-up question would be, this is great. Can I statement forward out of your LMS-based LRS into another one to go back to kind of that standalone LRS model that I showed on the previous slide? So ask to see examples, ask to track and play with your own real live data just to vet them a little bit as you go through that first step or RFP project or whatever it might be. All right. So if we can advance one slide, please. Another ecosystem, and this is what I was kind of hinting at moments ago, the LRS can send data to another LRS. This is done through a piece of the xAPI specification known as statement forwarding. And it's one of my favorite things as a guy who spends his time trying to help e-learning products play nicely with one another. And so if you do find an off-the-shelf LMS that claims to have an LRS, but it doesn't do exactly what you want, hey, that's not a problem. It can do a subset of things. You can use statement forwarding to send data out of that LRS and send it into the LRS available externally and hope that your data can show up with similar reports in both spots. This can allow you to connect activity providers and other LRSs that are external to your LMS together, even though that LMS might not be able to inbound data that you want. It also helps you share data between LRSs. This could be between different vendors in your ecosystem, or it may be the case that you are a component in an xAPI ecosystem with one of your customers who might be sophisticated enough to have xAPI LRSs of their own, and you are just one item among many in their xAPI ecosystem. So be sure to probe around and ask about those real-world use cases and what end in mind your customers might have so that you can understand the role your LRS will be playing in their much larger ecosystem. And then it also creates in this model different applications for different views into the data. In what you see on the screen, it may be that day-to-day LMS reporting is done in the LMS. I often see this be true for things like what I call the big four: time, completion, pass, fail, score. Those are core to learning. And whether we do it face-to-face or in a real-world type of simulator or on the job floor, you've got to know if somebody's completed or not, and if they have, what their score was, and if they passed or failed. Those are basics to us. And it may be that you're sending basic data to a customer or that the customer is receiving it. There are a lot of different ways that this ecosystem might support learning and help in ways that are meaningful for your organization. All right, so if we could advance one more standard. There we go, LRS Options. So you've got some choice of tools in the toolbox. This can allow you to be able to find the LRS that's right for you. You could build your own LRS using the xAPI specification. xAPI.com has a lot of resources there to help you build your own. You could also get the official specification documentation from ADL by visiting adlnet.gov. I've got a final slide here with all these links in it. You could also go to an open source LRS. Learning Locker kind of leads the way in that realm. But you've got to be able to configure that or look into their hosting services or run it somewhere. And that can often be a challenge depending on where in that learning curve you happen to fit. There are some OEM integratable learning record stores, original equipment manufacturer. I'm a car guy and this kind of comes from the car world, but if you just need an LRS and you want to bolt that to something else, cool. That's what we do here at Rustici, and that's about as salesy as I'm really going to get here out of the gate. We also then have a hosted record store with a UI. That's something that I intend to dive into a little deeper here as we advance our slides. But the SCORM Cloud is a great place to get started, everyone. This is a free hosted LRS, and our intent here is to try and pull down some of the technical barriers to getting started with xAPI. And SCORM Cloud is a great way to test the content that you've been using up to this point, to convert content from SCORM to xAPI, but more importantly, to just give you a real world place to get started, and we'll certainly walk through that together. Lastly, there's full-featured analytics platforms. Things like Watershed, which is a sister company of mine. Yet Analytics, I know Shelly over there really well, and I think they have a phenomenal product. And there are some others out on the market. And these tools are designed to help their user base log in, see what's happening, and to be able to show that outcome-based data. And certainly it fits into some of the ecosystems we've talked to before, but they are a great off-the-shelf buy option. You can just get their product, you can tell them the end that you have in mind, and these tools seem to have a consultative approach to help users really get what they want out of that type of experience. I see a couple questions have come in. Give me just a second to read them. So I'll certainly go into the difference between the LRSs at Rustici here in a second once I walk through the SCORM Cloud. So if we could advance one more slide for me. As you begin to experiment with the LRS that's right for you, I would like to point out that there is a benchmark or an industry best practice or whatever you want to call it. ADL, the official keepers of the SCORM, AICC, and xAPI specifications, have done some phenomenal work towards that. There's a test suite that you can use if you choose to build your own LRS to test against to make sure you're doing everything right. And there is, of course, a list of LRSs that have passed. And if you're looking at other vendors, you might want to reference those lists as best of breed or at least as demonstratable proof towards the products you're buying are useful. All right, let's advance one more slide here. Cool. So let's take a little look at the SCORM Cloud LRS. I'm going to be as not salesy as I possibly can, but this is a tool that's easy to get started with. I think it adds value to the things that you guys are working on. It helps you get your hands dirty rather than wring them about the technical challenges of setting up your own server and your own LRS ecosystem. It's simple to manage endpoints and activity providers, and it automatically converts SCORM and AICC that the SCORM Cloud plays into xAPI statements, storing them in the learning record store that our tool also includes. And so if some of you guys have been in the e-learning industry for a while and you have this huge library of legacy content and you're wringing your hands about the man hours it might take to go reauthor that stuff, hey, the SCORM Cloud can just do it on the back end and save you a lot of time. And finally, the SCORM Cloud LRS supports statement forwarding, which is the ability to pack up your toys and go play nicely somewhere else. It's a feature that SCORM and AICC made very difficult and often kept that data in the LMS. But now, thanks to statement forwarding, you could at least get started with SCORM Cloud and switch to any other product, and I'll walk you through how to do that. So let's advance one more slide. So everyone can log into the SCORM Cloud, cloud.scorm.com. You can sign up for a free trial. Every email address at your organization can have its own free trial, so feel free to share this with others on your team if you want to collaborate a little bit. And in there, you will be able to click on the xAPI Learning Record Store. And I've had to block out some data here and move it into slides so that I don't give away my secret sauce to my account. But you've got a few different options when looking at an xAPI Learning Record Store inside SCORM Cloud. The LRS endpoints, the activity providers, the LRS viewer, and then statement forwarding. And so we're going to walk through each of those tabs together. As far as LRS endpoints go, you can set up a near infinite list here and begin to categorize or divide your data inbound. These are the addresses that you should be able to configure and send your own xAPI statements to. And this is a management tool to help you control the flow of data into the right bucket. As we advance another slide, you'll notice that, let me go one more, there we go. We then have activity providers. And these are the credentials you can use to allow external activity providers that are trusted to you to send special data in. So this would be things like setting up a live simulation provider, setting up a VR training simulator, setting up some different unnamed account, choosing the authentication type, choosing if it's active or denied, setting some permission level. This helps you control and trust the flow of inbound data to your LRS. One more slide. These are the reports that we commonly see from a SCORM playback in SCORM Cloud. So SCORM Cloud isn't an LMS, it's intentionally something far less than that, but it is capable of delivering a SCORM course to a learner and then tracking their progress through it. I'm not going to dwell too much on what we do and how we do it there, but it can be a real easy way to deploy a course directly to a learner and then track their progress through it. What we're doing on the back end, though, is you'll see this type of report available for most SCORM completions. So this gives you kind of big four, it gives you insights, and I can even show individual interactions with a SCORM course, which are typically things like a question, what type of question it was, the result, what the right answer should have been, and what the learner's result was. Basic stuff that you commonly see in an LMS. If we advance one more slide, inside the xAPI LRS that we provide, we are going to automatically convert all of that. So you can see I've highlighted Chris completed the golf course with a score of 27. That's converting basic SCORM Big 4 data into a really cohesive xAPI statement. And if you were to log into your SCORM Cloud account and click on any of these items, we tree it out pretty rapidly and let you see the xAPI statement that we used in order to generate this so that you can make sense out of our madness. We don't want it to be a mysterious black box. This is our attempt at transparency so that you can see exactly what we're doing and begin to add these type of things to your own ecosystem. If we expand, you'll also notice that I've included all of the interactions as well. So we're taking those individual questions and answers that we saw in SCORM. Not every LMS even chooses to visualize that data, and converting it to xAPI statements, because I know that there are situations where you might care that no one in the world ever answered question 3 correctly in your quiz. Why is that? Have you marked the wrong answer as correct, or are you really just not teaching that concept well? Organizations that study their content can be more ready to evolve it to what actually meets the needs. And so this is one of the ways that we're attempting to provide additional insight for content creators, for managers, for trainers to be able to make sense out of the interactions that preceded their final learning experience, which you see highlighted here. All right, let's go to one more slide. So finally, there is statement piping or statement forwarding. And this is that pack your toys up and go play nicely somewhere else moment. This is going to give us the ability to say, okay, I started in SCORM Cloud. I did some good work in here. I've grown a little bit. I either have a customer that has their own LRS. I'm creating a centralized ecosystem. I bought a new LMS and they told me they had an LRS, so I'm going to give them all the things that I've been doing up to this point. This is the tool that helps you deliver that data to another compatible xAPI learning record store and move data around. Treating SCORM Cloud as an intermediary, treating SCORM Cloud as a translator at times, and being able to then transfer your data out into the ecosystem that most closely matches your learner's needs. It's a great way to get started, and my goal here is to make sure that you guys have enough flexibility to go take that next step together. So if you give me just a second here, I'm going to read through some of the questions. Oh, that's an interesting one. So the differences between the LRSs at Rustici software is a good one to start with, just at a really high level, and I don't want to take up the whole cohort's time with the name details of my products, but SCORM Cloud is a SaaS-based LRS. You can get started with it right away. If you're sending arbitrary statements to it, meaning you're authoring themselves using tools like the xAPI client libraries found at xapi.com/libraries, anything that's not launchable, you can drop it into the SCORM Cloud's LRS for free. I actually think the value is in the reports, and we don't provide any xAPI reports on top of custom data like that, and so I have no intention to charge for it at this time. You can treat it as a hosted LRS. You can send things to it. You can take things out. It's there for you to use. Get started with it. Have a great time. If you need to host it on your own servers, hey, that's cool too. We can deliver a compiled Java or .NET application. You can host it on your own infrastructure. It typically comes as a part of what we call our Rustici engine solution, which also provides the SCORM, AICC, TinCan, xAPI, IMS players that you'll find behind the scenes in leading LMSs, and there are probably close to 1,000 platforms out there running the engine behind the scenes. I can privately host either of those options for you as well, either just an LRS only or our full engine, and you interact with it via modern REST API. And we'll keep it on AWS with all the bells and whistles and take care of that. We're really flexible there, and it's certainly a much larger and more detailed conversation that's typically centered around your end in mind rather than the products that we offer. And Ask Us Anything really is that attitude that we have. So feel free to reach out directly if you'd like to learn more about how we can help deploy that. I see a good question here from Edwin, and I'm not sure I understand it, so I might need to poke and prod at this a little. Edwin asks, can an LRS also send an MQ to an MQTT server and look at MQTT server? I don't know those acronyms, so I'm going to have to punt on that. But Edwin, if you email me, I'm more than happy to dive in. There's chatter going on in 3 different places here. Let's see here. There are a list of LMSs that are... So there's some good questions in the chat happening now. Judy's providing data along with Megan. Look, it's hard to really wrangle what is an xAPI compliant LRS. ADL keeps a really good list. They call it their adopters. ADL also has their LRSs that have passed that certification suite. Both are good lists. Rustici also has an adopters list of our own, and we do our best to be good stewards of that information and just kind of say, hey, these people reached out. They told us they do xAPI. We did some minimal checks to say they are doing xAPI, and we've published their names as well. There's no official gatekeeping type of procedure in place. If you can make and send xAPI statements, you're probably xAPI conformant or compatible. check with those lists, ask those experts for help and guidance. But more importantly, if you do find a product that you're interested in, get them to show you how it works. I talked to far too many people, and I'm not going to say any names about troublesome ones I've heard of because I've never vet them, but I do talk to people on a regular basis who thought they were buying xAPI support, and it turned out they were getting something a little less than they expected. So again, lots of testing, lots of pushing there to make sure people are showing you the outcome that you want. If we can advance one more slide, these are some of the helpful resources that I've compiled together that I think this group would find useful. So first, sign up for SCORM Cloud for free. There's ADL's list of LRSs. There's the test suite if you choose to build your own. And the last link on there is our open source client libraries. We intentionally want to help the community make as many xAPI statements as possible. The complexity of storing them is intentionally placed on the LRS side, and we give you a free one to get started with. So if you do want to get started, and if you do have some ambition to begin to build your own statements, the SCORM Cloud's a great free and easy way to go experiment and build your own outcomes. Let's go back to my questions here. The difference between compliance and conformance and adopter, oh boy. The compliance, conformance, and adopter, there are people probably on this call far more pedantic than I am. Mike Rustici of our company's namesake used to have a long blog post on the difference between compliance and conformance. If I'm just being a human here, you're splitting hairs there. Conforming to something and complying to something are two different deals. I don't actually care between them. Call it what you want. The fidelity of that list and its adoption. Also, again, there are some technical reasons why you'd use one word over another. My advice, just test the tools that you think you might use or buy. Adopters, there are people out there that do great xAPI work that are probably not on that adopters list for whatever reason. There are people who have built great xAPI products that aren't on the conformance list because they never passed that test. That's also probably fine too. And there are people who self-claim compliance with xAPI, and I love them as well. So certainly, TJ Seabrook's my company's CEO. I know a lot of folks at ADL would have a lot of passionate discussions about the differences between those words. I don't really have as much enthusiasm towards splitting those hairs, but understand that my guidance is to test, make sure things get along, play, visualize the way that you want. And if any one of those compliance, adopters, conformance lists give you a head start towards tools that are meaningful to you, I think that's a great resource to go pull from. Don't get too hung up on the difference between those words, because I don't. Judy wants TJ. We don't have enough time for that, Judy. He sends me so we can keep it brief and succinct. I don't think the conformance list is a gatekeeper in any particular way. I find both of those lists to be pretty casual in the way that they've been rolled out, adopted, published. I've tried 3 different occasions at Rustici Software to begin to map, document, and control all of the e-learning products on the market. And guys, it's vast. If you visit elearningatlas.com, don't click on the tin can button, but that was an effort that TJ and I made in our early days at Rustici to just find in one cohesive list the number of e-learning companies on the market. And when we hit hundreds and then thousands, we stopped. So it's certainly not a well-kept or orchestrated list. My goal there is to say the space is vast, and curating and controlling all of the products that are available to you is a hard and difficult task that is often a bunch of people's full-time job, just given how big that pond is. And so, again, test tools, play with tools, meet new vendors. There are a lot out there. And if they aren't on a list that you like, ask why. Maybe they just don't know of it. If they are on a list that you like and it's not working the way you want, ask why. These lists are just a place to start. I don't think that they are deal killers either way, and you should be cautiously curious about what their claims are and how that works against provable FACSR-friendly type of moments. Chris may be able to clarify. I think it's forwarded read as it comes in. So Matt, you're right. It can send it, or you can bulk send them later. So the statement forwarding available in the SCORM Cloud's LRS can be real time or in bulk, whatever you want, and we just let you configure that to be what you need it to be. Sorry, I'm just reading some of Matt's other things. Yeah, no problem. Excellent. So the question board is free. I think I have one last slide, but I don't think it's compelling. I think it's just my contact information. There it is. Hi. So guys, ask us anything really is our attitude. We're pretty casual the way that we approach these things. Rustici Software is not a group of consultants. I have nothing to sell you when it comes to just hourly work to explain xAPI. And my attitude is really, ask me anything really. We go into these things deep. I'll go as deep down this rabbit hole as you want. And if you ever just hit a point at which I sell something, I will tell you. Other than that, ask a lot of questions. There are a lot of experts on this call. Megan and Judy are both two good people to ask questions to. But I am just the face of Rustici. I've got all the guys who help write the spec in the office, and we can go as deep as you need to, either on a product conversation, because I make these tools way easier to deal with than trying to write them yourselves. But we also have all the experts. If you choose to get into pedantic details about xAPI and what is the intent, and we want to write our own, we'll answer those too. Ask us anything is our attitude, and we're always happy to jump in and help on that front. So that was the balance of what I had prepared for this call, but I'm more than happy to keep talking and answer questions and get what you guys want out of it. I'm going to turn it back over to the cohort here for a little help wrangling cats together.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to transition back over to cohort business. You have Chris's contact information. He is very open and willing to engage with you, so make sure you leverage that resource. Thank you so much, Chris.
You're welcome.
So we're going to hop right into talking about our teams, talking about where teams should be, and getting into some team updates. So we are officially in week 5 of the spring 2020 xAPI cohort. Teams should be working and digging into details around their projects, assigning tasks, meeting, iterating, breaking things, trying things, and learning. If you're not there yet, that's okay. You're never too late for cohort. It is a very flexible model. In fact, from last week to this week, we had 15 new folks join in. So you can still be observing teams and what they're doing. If you're not in the digging in the details and taking on tasks yet, that's perfectly fine as well. Or if you've already prototyped and have a solution, that's fine as well. We all are at different levels, and everybody is welcome. So really quickly, we're trying something new with team check-ins this week. We will be using GitHub, so I will be sharing my screen in just a moment. But if you are giving the update for your team, we want to give you mic privileges. So if you are on Adobe Connect and using VoIP, please raise your hand. And you can raise your hand by clicking the icon with the raised hand, and that lets our team know, our producers know, that they will give you mic access. If you are called in, you're going to click the star, the asterisk, twice. And this is going to give you mic access on your call. So I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen so that we can all be on the GitHub page. And then we're going to start with some updates. So I know that Joanne is not here today, so I'll read the update for ECE. The accomplishments this week in ECE is early childhood education. They're building an app. So this week they created draft xAPI statements for documenting offline educational activities. They also drafted a CAS spreadsheet to draft some JSON statements. and they put the links right there. Where they might need support is feedback on the draft statements and spreadsheet. What they want to accomplish in the next week is decide if they're interested in the Pebble integration with educational interactions, Alexa integration with care instructions, and xAPI early childhood education business model definition. So they're making headway. If you want to review their statements and their spreadsheet, the links are there, and I'm sure that they would really appreciate your feedback. Team Alexa, I saw Izzy rose his hand. Are you able to give your update, Izzy?
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so my team actually, I wasn't available to meet with them, but they met without me and they discussed some possibly redoing our call script because Megan on our team actually has a use case for this already in the real world. So we're going to actually use her call script. We'll build part of it and then we'll iterate on it going forward.
It's awesome news.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go to Team Adaptive Learning. Brady, are you on the call? Or anybody available to give their update for Team Adaptive Learning? Alrighty. They decided on the xAPI module topic and researched how to design adaptive learning systems. They started to create a JS plugin to test with. They might need support with machine learning and artificial intelligence. So if anybody has those skill sets, go ahead into their Slack channels. And they might need help creating xAPI statements to send from their module. They hope to accomplish completing a prototype of adaptive learning with the content and decide what statements they'll need to send from the module. Our next team is Team Audio Video. Is anyone from Team Audio Video on the line to give the update? Jeremy or anyone? All right. Team Captivate JS Library. Brian, are you on the line to give that update?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay.
Sarah Moore for Team Audio Video.
Go ahead. Yes. Okay. Awesome. Did you want to give your update for the week from Team Audio Video?
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Sorry about that. So for Team Audio Video, we are testing 2 different formats of video, and we're working on an agnostic, or trying to work on an agnostic iframe that would read video, the xAPI for video formats, and then we're going to pull it all into RISE and sort of track the xAPI from that too. And we're wanting our RISE to fit in an LMS. So we've had lots of ups and downs, and so far we've had 1 meeting, and we will have another meeting this Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time if anyone wants to join.
Awesome. Thank you. Team Captivate. I think we are Team Dragon Stats. Is anyone on the session to update about Team Dragon Stats? Okay. Team Makey Makey. Is
Hello.
Brian on the line? Awesome. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay. So our group was able to meet last Friday. Part of what we were able to do was to work through setup of the team within the Slack channel. We built out our GitHub account and built a GitHub repository. And then we went through a Google Hangouts meeting as a video conference. So we did get a recording of the meeting, but unfortunately my audio as host was muted. So I'm doing some editing on that to edit the narration back in, and I'll get a couple segments of that video posted within the GitHub. I believe I can host my video there. The key is that we talked about building applications, a series of applications in 3 stages. So stage 1 is to build a cross-platform app for setup and testing of the Makey board. The initial build is desktop only, as Makey is a USB device, so it'll be available for Mac, Windows, and Linux. We are requesting the team and other cohort members get into the GitHub and test the desktop and provide feedback. And let me rephrase that. I'm reading this as if it's planned, but we've already posted those apps into our GitHub, so people after the cohort can immediately go in and download either a Mac, Windows, or Linux version of the app and test it out. If you'll look at our notes within the GitHub and the update on the discussion board, you'll see that there is a known issue. People who don't have a Makey board connected are able to test the application, but by default, one of the buttons that Makey uses is a click button. And since this application would be interacting, or since the person downloading this application would be interacting with it via a mouse and clicking on it, that click button is going to give feedback whether it gets clicked on or not. So that's a known issue. Stage 2 is we're looking at building a learning record provider. We're going to set up another app that is cross-platform. Again, Mac, Windows, Linux. We might be able to port this out to iOS and Android for tablets and phones. That would allow us to prototype sending xAPI statements. So that is sort of where we're at. And stage 3 is to integrate the two. The architecture of this is that so stage 1 could be used as a standalone for other Makey projects that don't relate to xAPI. And stage 3 will integrate the two of them. So one of the things that we've done in the video is I'm personally working in a live code development environment. Makey actually recommends Scratch as a development environment. And then there are other tools that are available for people. And we had 3 people on the team call in. And so one of the things we did was brainstorm ideas about how the final application can be used. So one of the suggestions was for a communication board for special needs as input via the Makey. Another was an application for a disabled use, similar to the communications board. And then we were also suggested to consider a use case for an alternative for clickers in the classrooms. So for a way for students to sort of compete if they had, say, a Jeopardy or some other interactive environment on the screen, that it would be able to allow them to call in or click in and respond. So finally, let me wrap up by saying we're having an ongoing meeting time at 3 o'clock immediately following xAPI cohort. We'll be in the Slack channel and in the Google Hangout, as well as 3 p.m. Friday will be another time for a work session. So there's a couple chances for people to join in. Again, people who are curious about what the Makey is about can join our Slack channel and see about downloading the app and trying it out and giving us some feedback on it. We just want to make sure it's working on all platforms at this point. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Team mapping data for AI. Is there anyone that's able to give an update on that team? Scott or anyone? All right. Team Moodle plugins. Adam, or is there anyone able to give an update on Team Moodle plugins? Okay. Team Pebble. I believe I saw Judy raise her hand. Are you able to give an update on behalf of Team Pebble?
We have a couple of different things going on the team. Mostly we've been kind of getting up to speed on the tools that we're using with Pebble and CAS. We did have a start made on the Pebble xAPI profile that we're planning to put together. One of the things that we're doing this semester. So Brian has made a start on that. And then just in general, trying to solidify what we're doing for our projects and the tools that we're using.
Awesome, thank you. Team Podcast. Is anyone on the line to give an update on behalf of Team Podcast? Sam or anyone? I see that Sam put the update in the chat. We did not meet, but independently made progress on both web player examples and aggregating and mapping parameters from other existing standards, so HTML5, audio, video, xAPI video, open podcast, analytics, etc. We plan to meet again next week and hope to have a working sample soon thereafter. Awesome. Thank you for that update, Sam. The next team is Team SharePoint LMS integration. Is there anyone on the line to give that update? Stephanie or anyone? Okay, they're meeting as a team, understanding their project goals, changed their meeting time to 3 p.m. every Wednesday. Their next meeting is going to discuss platforms for building proof of concept, the trial version of LRS LMS SharePoint. So if you're interested in starting out, go ahead and join their Slack channel. Is there anyone on the line for Team Smart Builder to LRS? Okay, Team Storyline. Team Sheets Zapier. Jason, I think I saw you on the line. Did you want to give an update? I see Jason's typing in the chat. No microphone. If you go ahead and put your update in the chat, Jason, I can read it for you. And then Team Unity 3D Sandbox. Is Eric or anyone on the line to give that update?
Now, hey, this is Eric. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, wonderful. Hi. Yeah, this is just a quick update. We just moved our our fall cohort activity into the spring GitHub. So that update is now in place. And I met with David Jumeau, and we had a nice brainstorming session. We are going to continue to try to meet on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Just to be able to brainstorm on our project. I think there should be a more recent update than that one that you're showing on the screen, but I can just tell you from my page here, one second, that we've kind of re-architected what our goal is going to be for the spring, and we're focused on, obviously, with the GBL xAPI as the foundation in Unity, and we've started building some interactive components, or at least brainstorming what those will be, so that we can have something to demo in the next couple of weeks. So this is an open invitation for anybody who's interested in Unity 3D to go ahead and just join, and you can observe, participate. I would love to see you there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric and David. And so I think that is all the teams. Thank you, Christy, for that update. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and go back into the presentation. And we're right at the top of the hour. And we just want to remind you, we're here every week at 2 o'clock Eastern. You can join the cohort web sessions using that link. We also tweet it out every Wednesday and Thursday and put it in the cohort Slack channel. So if you ever lose the link, we're sending it to you. Next week, we're going to have Megan Torrance, and I don't know if Megan wanted to give a precursor to her presentation next week. She's going to talk a little bit about the state of adoption and her research with the e-learning guild. and what's to come and what's now. May 7th, we're in Michigan and online at our xAPI party. You can go ahead and sign up at torranceLearning.com/xAPI party. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email me, Jess, at jjackson@torrancelearning, or message me in Slack. Have an awesome Thursday, everyone. Get out there and make something.